There's much to say. I know. Good evening. I think we want to start now. There were processes and procedures to enter the room, but we are very happy to have with us Markus Ferber as one of the speakers, and I hope Mr. Robin Edme will be online as well for a discussion, a debate on something which has been with us a long time, but which is even more topical today, which is competitiveness in a geopolitical world. Let me welcome as well Domenico Rossetti. I am Secretary General of Group EUrope of UEF. Mr. Ferber is Vice President of the Union of European Federalists. We have also with us Mr. Domenico Rossetti di Valdalbero, who is the Secretary General of UEF Belgium, and helping to introduce the debate. Be aware that the debate is being recorded, if that's okay with you, and that so we plan to have different stages. But before I introduce a number of questions to structure the discussion, I would like to ask Mr. Rossetti to make a general introduction to the issue. Yes.
Thank you very much, Catherine, and it's a great pleasure to be with you. And thank you also to the UEF Belgium member, which are in the room and also connected. I see also that, unfortunately, Estelle Gurger was not able to join us. Then let me say also a few words about the Commission perspective, about competitiveness. And I would be very glad to quote President von der Leyen. Yesterday, at the Clean Tech conference, she was saying, "We know the challenges businesses are facing, high energy cost, a lack of access to finance, unfair global competition, and difficult sourcing of critical raw materials." And she added, "Our climate goals remain the same, but we will be more flexible and pragmatic on how we achieve them." I fully share this perspective. I think that she points out to the major issue of competitiveness. She's also building on the different reports that we had last year, the Enrico Letta report, the Mario Draghi report. I would add also the Manuel Aitor, the former Portuguese research minister, underlining the key role of research and innovation for EU competitiveness. We must close the productivity gap vis-à-vis the US and China. And this is obviously closely related to research and innovation. The Competitiveness Compass is working on it, as well as the current activities on the future European Competitiveness Fund, where the aim is to reassemble all the different financial tools that we have to promote, to incentivize research and innovation under one single umbrella. We need in Europe to improve our total factor productivity, including by using more efficiently digital technologies and artificial intelligence. That's where a major productivity gap vis-à-vis the American and the Chinese was visible. Competitiveness is also a question of resource-efficient growth. We all have in mind the European Green Deal. Europe wants to get rid of fossil fuels and to be a carbon-neutral continent by 2050, but with economic growth, with prosperity, and with well-being for its citizens. A key point for competitiveness is also our technological sovereignty. In these sensitive geopolitical times, with threats on both East and West, we must reduce our dependencies and increase security and resilience. And this was also very well described in the Ninisto report a few months ago. If we do not have access to natural resources, or if we are cut from energy or telecommunication networks, we cannot be competitive. We speak a lot about a geopolitical Europe, I prefer the term geotechnological Europe. Without a strong technological, industrial and technological basis, we will not be able to become competitive. 30 years ago, when I was still at university, it's a long time, in Maastricht at the Merit with Luc Soete, Jacques Delors was publishing his white paper on growth, competitiveness and employment. And I take the time a few days ago, in order to prepare myself, Catherine, to see what were the main messages in this white paper of Jacques Delors. And in the competitiveness chapter, I will just raise 4 points that were there. The first was towards a global competitiveness. At the time of Delors, the threat was not China, it was Japan. Just remember the Sony Walkman, the Panasonic and the Pioneer radio, the reliability of the Toyota cars. That was really the threat, Japan, from which these last few years we do not hear a lot, but still it remains a key technological actor. Today, obviously, we are more afraid about Huawei, Alibaba, and BID. And due to the Trump administration, our relation with the US are strongly deteriorating. The second point of Jacques Delors was making the most of the internal market. It's completely actual. In the Competitiveness Compass, the European Commission presents the 28th regime, this optional legal framework that should provide a single, harmonized set of EU-wide rules, including on corporate law, on labor and tax law. There was a third element in the Jacques Delors white paper, which remains very valid, is the trans-European network. Today, when we see the still existing bottlenecks at the national borders, be it for electricity transmission lines or for high-speed trains, we see how much Jacques Delors was forward-looking. Even if you are an eco-altruist, you are always thinking to pay a train ticket, a very expensive train ticket, rather than a low-cost air company. Green transport modes are not yet sufficiently vibrant and competitive. Dear colleagues, today in the industry, European industry is paying between 2 and 3 times more the energy cost than the US and China. This is a major barrier, especially for energy-intensive industry. Just think to the chemical industry that is consuming a lot of heat. Just think to steel, glass, ceramics, and many others. This is a key question for competitiveness. Jacques Delors was saying at the time, more than 30 years ago, there is no miracle treatment, neither protectionism, and obviously I'm not making any reference today to the tariffs, nor a dash for economic freedom. And Jacques Delors, which was more on the left wing, was saying, turning on the tap of government spending and creating money can, like a narcotic, produce a short-lived illusion of well-being. But the return to reality will be all the more painful. And that was Jacques Delors in 1993. Dear colleagues, just before German reunification, Germany and California had the same GDP per capita. Last year, a Californian had a GDP per capita more than 50% higher than a German. And I'm sure that the Member of Parliament, Honourable Member of Parliament, will certainly raise this point. And I hope that to find a European competitiveness way is fundamental, and we hope to get some wonderful receipts this night. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this substantial introduction. I'm waiting for the other speaker who says that it will be very difficult to connect before 7:25 or 7:30. And he's still looking for the link to connect. Well, these are part of the hazards of conferences, hybrid conferences. But as Domenico mentioned, Mrs. Göger indeed apologized. Lots of things are happening these days. And today there was something with the ECOFIN Council agenda, which was making it impossible for her to be present. It's a pity, but we have to manage. without her. And I think we'll catch up with Mr. Edmond, who is a senior expert in sustainable finance. And he is somewhere in France. The way I suggested organizing or structuring the discussion, which will end at 8:30 sharp, sorry to be very practical, is to raise first the question of what is competitiveness, because everybody's talking about it, but I'm not sure we understand the same thing or exactly. The second question I would like to address is the question of the scarcity of resources in European Union and the issue of internal fragmentation. Last, I would like to broach with Mr. Ferber the question of European defense and, of course, finance. This is more or less the way in which I would like to structure the thing. And first, competitiveness, as I said, has long been an EU objective, even from the time of the white paper of Mr. Jacques Delors. Look at chapter 10 in particular. At least, and especially after 2008 and the financial crisis, we then were through 2 decades of slow growth, and this gap of competitiveness towards the United States has widened. Mentioning Mr. Draghi, who will be, of course, our perfect reference for reflections and debate, is the gap in the share of world GDP, which has grown from 15% to 13%, 30 twice, in 2023, as compared to the United States. So obviously we are losing ground. Then what is competitiveness? Is it mirrored by what Mr. Trump seems to think, or very much so, that is a trade surplus? Is it, do we have to understand that this is at bottom what competitiveness is about? And the paradox being that the EU has a trade surplus, so we should be more competitive. Of course, okay, it's a relative trade surplus. So I'm a bit lost myself, and I hope to get more and better understanding at the end of the conference with your help and the help of the participants. There is a paradox, or is competitiveness about multidimensional loss of economic capacity to generate added value and prosperity? Now, what do you have to say about Mr. Trump, Mr. Ferber? Lots.
Yeah, thank you very much. First of all, I'm very pleased as Vice President of the Union of European Federalists to be here and to have the chance to speak here from this famous room from the European Commission. For a member of the Parliament, it's always a great honor to be in the permits of the European Commission. But having said that, I think what we are seeing at these times is really something I thought I will never see in my lifetime. And so I'm a baby boomer generation. I grew up, finalized my studies when Germany got its reunification, when the Iron Wall broke down, when we started open Europe to the Central Eastern countries, which are now member of the European Union. And I really went with an optimism in this world. Wow, what a lucky generation I am, or people in my age, to live in these times where we have overcome all these threats. And then we saw some obstacles that we are not living in this wonderful time anymore. And we cannot start without discussing the horrible attack from Russia against Ukraine, where we think Ukraine has the right to decide where it wants to belong to after it got independent in 1990 as well. And we thought we can offer something serious. And we had the feeling that the majority of the population of Ukraine was accepting that, which means, of course, closer to the West and at the end, member of the European Union. And that is now put into threat by the Russian aggression. And we see in these days that even that, what Europe is about or was about, as well as we have been founded as an economic community. And that's why I can really rely on what Domenico has said already. that in this world will continue and will be, because of trade relations and trade interlinks, better than ever, because no one will put out a circuit or make a circuit breaker, because that will destroy everything. And that is what we see at the moment. Yeah, what Mr. Trump is doing is destroying a way of organizing the world as it was done in the last 50 years, or especially in the last 30 years, and Europe benefited a lot of that. So, but we come to your question very soon as well, because I think that is a key issue which we have to address. Trade surplus is not a value by itself. And I think mercantilism, so everyone has to have a trade surplus and the world is better, but if everyone has a trade surplus, there's someone who has to have a trade minus, otherwise it will not work. And that is what even a French king had to learn 250 years ago, where mercantilism was the economic model of the time, and it was not proper functioning either. And only to speak about competitiveness, as Mr. Trump is complaining about US cars, which are not sold in that way in Europe. Yeah, sorry, have you ever driven a US car? You know how much fuel it uses per 100 kilometers? We cannot afford that. That's not our way of living. That is not how we are used to deal with that. It's wonderful to have a car with 4 liters because it's very quiet driving in the United States, but that is not how we are driving. That is not how we think we are responsible for the environment. Yeah, sorry to mention these things. It's not about a crash test, what he has introduced now in the last days, because this crash test is not for the question whether the car breaks or not. It's about that the glass is not hurting the driver when something like that happens at a bowling ball goes in the front of a car, only to mention one of these crazy things we hear at the moment. So, but coming back to your question, I think on the one hand, we are competitive in the world markets, otherwise we wouldn't have a trade surplus. On the other hand, and that is what Draghi mentioned in his report very clearly as well as one of the introductory analysis that, and you spoke about Germany to California, he speaks about Europe to United States in 2022. So 23 years ago, the GDP per capita in the US was 15% higher than in the European Union, and now it's 30%. So there is a gap in the GDP development, and that is something we have to address. And those longer staying here, remember, for example, the Barroso strategy or the Lisbon strategy to become the most competitive science-based area on the world. The competitiveness was mentioned there as well. I think we have not achieved the aim, but a lot of measurements have been taken inside this Lisbon strategy. And on the other hand, and that is what me is more concerning, Draghi is not mentioning that, the United States are a market which has already everything in overflow. We are a market who still has potential to develop. If you look to Central Eastern Europe countries, if you look to our neighbors in the Western Balkans, in the East, beyond this horrible war, it should be the case that we have more growth. But if you look even to the potential growth rates, they are lower than in the United States. And that is what Draghi mentioned as well, with a generation which becomes older and older. He quotes that in 24 years, we are losing 2 million people in the labor market. And even that reduces the potential growth rate, which means if you use everything properly, how can you grow? And honestly, the member state I know best, I think that is the phrase here in Brussels, Germany, who has a potential growth rate from only 0.5%, it shows there we have a lack. And that brings me to the questions we are discussing at the moment. I think what the Commission has addressed properly now, less bureaucracy. So let's do the things which are needed, but do not overrun things with too much reporting obligations, with too much bureaucracy on the one hand. The other thing is we are very good in innovation. I think that's one of the problems of the member state I know best as well. We are inventing a lot of things, but we are not able to bring these innovative ideas on the road with products. Other markets, are they better? You spoke about China, and the 4 Asian drakes was at this time the phrase, South Korea and others. Singapore was the 4 drakes, states like that. That was the challenge of the 80s, and I couldn't agree more. Who brought our innovations on the street, the famous fax machine everyone is laughing about, but at this time it was, oh, high innovative fax machine invented in Germany, produced in Japan. Yeah, a classical thing. And we had long lists at this time of this problem, and we still have this problem. And on the other hand, we learned, and that is, I think, as we Europeans used all the possibilities of the last 30 years of this way of organizing our economy, that other areas became more and more competitive for a good sake, because the living circumstances for the people are better there. India, which is a closed market, we are more open to them than they are for us. That's why I appreciate that we are negotiating for the moment a free trade agreement, that we have better access. You remember we have a free trade agreement now with Japan as well, which was a closed market as well in the past. And I think that is needed as well to overcome the US. And the last thing, as you want to get an estimation about the United States, I have the feeling that the president has a lot of advisors who don't give him advice, or he is not listening to the advice they give him, or they only applaud about everything he says. But that is, if Ursula von der Leyen would behave the same, asking someone, what do you think, and say, oh, I don't like what you say, go away, will not bring us forward. But that is what we see at the moment. He thinks he knows everything better. Maybe that an economy like the United States, where 90% of the goods are dealt inside the United States. You have to be aware of that. In Europe, we are around below 60% at the moment. It was already a little bit higher, but COVID brought us down, and I hope we can reestablish that, and the economic crisis before. So they are less dependent from other markets than we are. Of course, in some areas they are very dependent, and they do not have the resources to overcome that. But Take 5 is a wonderful music. Yeah, I like it. So for us, number 2 is strengthening the single market, to get rid of non-tariff burden inside the single market, to be less dependent from other markets as well. And number 3, for achieving more competitiveness, is that what we call nowadays resilience, that we are able to have more in the production chain produced inside the European Union, which doesn't mean in one country, in the European Union, because every place in the European Union has its advantages and can bring them in to create better competitiveness. I think that would be my first 3 main issues to address to overcome this problem, that we have on the one hand trade surpluses, but in the question of wealth, which of course is linked to social stability as well, to be very clear, because we don't have to keep that away. Wealth is not a value by itself as long as it's not balanced. I think that is one of the main problems of the United States. The wealth gap is more broad than in the European Union. It's one of our advantages. And to safeguard that, of course, we have to be able to address that. And I think that are some of the key elements we should focus on.
Thank you. I think we may have to clap you further, because this was a substantial response to my difficult question. I should also mention something, which is that you know a little bit about competitiveness, because you're the chair of the subcommittee on tax matters. That's another issue of interest. And you're a member of the Economic Affairs Committee in the European Parliament. So I think you've studied a little bit more than I have. And thank you for your answers. Now, to return to the issue of dependencies, before I turn, I have, and I think you accepted, seen that we would go back to the public after each of the 3 steps, if we can manage the time, and wait for a few questions to come from you. So be at the ready. The question of our dependencies, as it has been said several times, in the golden age, the past golden age of globalization, we outsourced our energy needs to Russia, our economy to China, and our security to the transatlantic alliance. Now, in the new geopolitical world, the age of minimizing costs, that is, the quest for comparative advantages, is over, or may well be over. Now we are faced with critical dependencies, you mentioned already, a weakened economic security. How can we manage a strong transition and not hang on to the status quo? And I'm sorry, Mr. Ferber, because the other speaker does not exactly show up yet, even though I exchanged an email. Status quo? To sum it up, yes.
Yeah, I was joking before that the member of the European Parliament has no obligations, so he has free time and is very happy that from time to time we get an invitation like tonight. But now I'm confronted that I have to be the one and only, which brings me to the situation as now I left my field of competences, as you mentioned, that I'm a member of the Economic and Monetary Affairs Committee, and there's a spokesperson of the EPP group. So I have some responsibilities in that area. But honestly, we have to be aware that our continent has some advantages, unfortunately some disadvantages as well. And if we speak about raw materials, we have some disadvantages. We are not well equipped with raw materials, especially those we need for the 21st century and for the transition, for example, to become carbon neutral tremendously. And therefore, we are dependent from other regions in the world to have access to that. And if you look what's happening, coming back to Trump, what's happening between China and the United States at the moment, which is it's really war. It's economical war, what they are doing, that China made restrictions on access to rare earth, which is needed for electrical mobility, for example, but that's only one issue where you need rare earth. Everything which is done with an electrical motor engine needs rare earth. Only to describe the background. That they make limited access for the United States to these raw materials. And even Canada is thinking, they have them as well, is thinking on such restrictions. And the last, where we have it available, we have some smaller sources in other parts of the world, is Mongolia, which is surrounded by Russia and China, which makes it not easy to export. So that will hurt American industry in the short, in the midterm and long term as well, and shows how dependent even rich regions are if they are not well reserved with resources. So that's why we started already in the last period, thanks to a good initiative from the European Commission with the Raw Materials Act, and that is something to be improved now with the Clean Industrial Act, that we have a better usage of those raw materials we have already inside the European Union, which means recycling, using the things we have already used to reuse them, especially on those areas where we have a lack of. And of course, in the area of exploiting possibilities, as we have some restricted inside the European Union. We heard about Sweden, who has some things in the north. We heard about Spain, where could be a possibility that we can organize the access to that, what we have in Europe by ourselves as well. I think that is the first step. But honestly, it's only a step, as we are lacking with these things. And therefore, recycling is very important, but to have access to the raw materials from other areas in the world as well. And that's why I come back. Chile is very important for lithium, for example. The Mercosur free trade agreement plays a vital role in this area. Also, I know that even the farmers in my constituency are not very happy, so I do not complain about farmers from other member states. I have the same problem in my constituency, to be honest. I have the famous Allgäu, which has 5% of milk production of European Union. It's only my constituency to mention that. Therefore, I know the problems, but I see on the other hand the possibilities as well, and I hope we get a balanced approach. We are waiting now for the translated agreement that we can really go in depth and analyze it and check it. But we have to think on those things as well, how we can manage access from our side. And on the other hand, we have to again think on innovations, because honestly, I spoke already how old I am. I remember the batteries of the old mobile phones. That was really heavyweight, yeah, because we did not have the technology at these times to bring high density of electricity with low weight in a cell phone or a smartphone. In former times, it was only a cell phone. In a smartphone. In nowadays, we have solved the problem. But this is not the answer for battery electric vehicles, because then you have the high temperature problem, and we have to innovate there. And I think there are new techniques available, and we have to innovate them. And maybe we need less access to these kind of raw materials, which for the moment are the number ones to be needed. And that brings me back. Innovation is key for these issues. I had yesterday a presentation from a researcher how to make hydrogen different than as we learn it at school with electricity. And I think that is amazing. So let's do it. Let's test it. Let's try whether it really functions in not only in the lab, but under real circumstances, whether we can use that. I think that are the tools we have to use as well. And therefore, I hope that we will not see what we had 7 years ago when we started to discuss the financial frame, that the spare box for everything was the research program. And to be honest, I was 10 years in the budget committee, so I know this, how this works as well. And we need innovation, and I think therefore the cross-border cooperation, and that is the added value of the European research program, has to be equipped in a better way that we really can deliver that. But as I said, the lack of innovation to products has to become overcome as well. I remember a long time ago in my first legislative period, we had a program which was called Thermie. Schulthermie, long time ago. It was linked to the Euratom Treaty. I see, I'm not the only one who knows it, okay. Maybe we met over there. I was a little bit younger than now. But that gave us the possibility to make prototypes and to finance prototypes. And I think that is something, as for the moment, research is pre-competitive. And we take care on that because of WTO and all the things, but maybe WTO is not existing in that sense. I'm not quoting Trump, but maybe we can spend some money on that as well, that we help the industry, because at the end, if we can show it works to do the scale up, that can be privately financed, but you need the first risk taker in the public hands, and I think that is something Europe could deliver as well. Only to mention a few ideas from my side, where I think we have a chance and should not be as pessimistic looking in the future as some in our days do. We are not as bad as other people tells us.
Great. Thank you. You actually gave elements of response to my next questions about competitiveness with in energy, which is one of our problems. I understand you are luring us with the search, and I think not just luring us, because there are proposals on the table. Obviously, we have the Clean Industrial Deal, we had the Net Zero Industry Act coming from the Commission, and this idea of having our own path towards competitiveness or better economic prospects, reuse, recycle, decarbonize, and negotiate trade agreements in order to have access to raw materials and other rare resources. This is probably the one path that the EU must now actively pursue. Could I interrupt now and ask the public whether at this stage they have one or two questions on what? I mean, you can also ask a question. Domenico, if you have one. Giorgio has one. You have to press the button. Huh? Press hard.
With some
there. Press hard, indeed, harder than in the buildings we are. Hello, I joined the Commission 35 years ago, and indeed, I'm going back to the white paper of Delors. He was speaking about growth, competitiveness, and employment. And being a young PhD, I criticized it by saying it's 1 century old, because the next century, we were in 1992, would have been about development, something which would have not used resources. I was following the Club of Rome, not a mad green, but definitely very aware, I was 30, of the need to develop in a sustainable way. Employment was going to die in the way that we said. It would be about activity, people having 2, 3 jobs, changing jobs. The model that we had in the 90s was you come, you work for a company, you leave, you get your pension. That model was already changing then, and the white paper was not looking at it. And as for competition, I was saying we have to look at what Japan was doing at the time, which is co-opetition. In the example of the fax that you had or TV, the Japanese came together to attack us with state subsidies, and once they had killed the Europeans who were there, then they would fight it out and raise the prices. So in particular, I'm interested about the notion of co-opetition or competitiveness. Co-opetition, cooperation, competition. So in research and innovation, where I am working, we have a very clear model, which is we cooperate when we're far from the market, and we have things which are called joint undertaking in health, where we now have the whole of the health industry of Europe. So it started with the pharmaceuticals, but it's called Innovative Health Initiatives. We have the federation of all the pharmaceuticals, the federations of all the medtech. I see colleagues there who are much more aware than me, who are working together to cooperate, to do clinical trials, et cetera, and when it gets close to the market, then they fight it out. And that is an area where Europeans are very good. So the question is, co-opetition or competition? Are rules for competition, shouldn't we make them a little bit easier? Strategic autonomy, we need that product, even if the Japanese, Chinese, or the Americans are better than us, and less expensive. Well, we need a European product. So, some of these rules, strategic autonomy and cooperation, are these two things which you think DG Comp would agree with?
Yeah.
As I had the honor to have Ms. Ribera, the responsible commissioner, yesterday in our committee, as we are responsible for competition policies in the European Parliament, in the Econ. I fully agree, because that was my question. And I asked her, as the fusion control regulation is now more than 20 years old, whether the issue of relevant market, for example, has to be redesigned in these new circumstances, whether it's not between Belgium and the Netherlands or Germany and France, but Europe and China, Europe and India, Europe and the United States. And then, of course, you can come to other conclusions. And even if you look to the papers of our days, like a Clean Industrial Deal, which I really support, it's a good approach, but the competition area is not addressed. The tax area is addressed, environmental, of course, there are a lot of issues addressed, but the competition part, which role of the GD comp in that area is not mentioned. And I think if we identify, and you will come to defense later, if we identify crucial areas where we want to strengthen Europe and where we want to have a really European approach to be less dependent from other markets or jurisdictions, GD Comp has to play a crucial role to achieve that. On the one hand, to better integrate the single market, and on the other hand, so my favorite is always telecommunication, and I said as long as we have 27 national telecom markets, I will never sit in an automatic driven car. Because I know what happens at the borderline, as I have a constituency with a borderline to Austria, where I'm not connected for a while. So I don't want to sit in a car which is not connected for a while, to be honest. Yeah. So I can live with that. I know it. But my car, what will it do? Yeah. So only to mention this thing, yeah, to give a ridiculous but understandable example what it means. And she said, oh, it's not in my mission letter. And so I was a little bit disappointed, yeah, to be honest, but we managed that we will continue the discussion. I'm fully with you. We have to rethink our strategy with a broader approach, taking all policies Europe has in hands together if we want to achieve something. And therefore, I think GD Comp plays a very crucial role in the good sense, if it is adapted properly, or in the bad sense, if we are not able to succeed. But to be very clear, and that is in my conviction as Vice President of UEF, the main problem is not GD Comp. The main problem is not the European Parliament. The main problem are the capitals, the national governments. The main problem is the Council in all these areas who is not ready to move because everyone has, oh, I have my national problem, I have my speciality that has to be safeguarded. If all 50 states in the United States would behave like that, we wouldn't have these problems with competitiveness. That's one of our main hurdles. And to be very clear, and I say it here in the public as well, the problem is not the Commission, the problem is not the European Parliament, but the third party on the table creates all these problems which we have to overcome. Otherwise, we will speak about in 10 years, or my successors will speak about it as well, and address the same issues. That has to be done, this has to be done, and nothing has been delivered. We know what it has to be done, and I hope that some member states take initiative. So I grew up in the area of Helmut Kohl, honestly, and Helmut Kohl once said to me as a young politician, look, Mr. Ferber, I do not take into account what's good for Germany. I take into account what's good for Europe, because what is good for Europe, even if people don't understand it in the beginning, in the long run, it's as well good for Germany.
So, to Mrs. Meloni.
Yeah, like the euro. The euro was not well received in Germany. Yeah, Deutschmark, hey. Yeah, sorry. It was one of my first things I had to promote as a young MEP. I started in '94. It was not that I was received with huge applause. But we now, in the long run, we've been the main benefiters. Germany, the export nation Germany, has been the main benefiter, because all the problems afterwards, we did not have this high value of the Deutschmark in relation to other currencies anymore. So competitiveness really came in higher salaries to our workers, and not in a different ratio between the currencies, only to mention one of these things. And that is what we need, these convicted Europeans who really mean Europe when they say it, and deliver, even if they understand it's in the short run not directly in the benefit of my country, but in the long run a benefit for all of us. And that is the mood we need again on European level. Sorry, I grew up with that and I have it still in my heart. That's why I'm so convicted and dedicated to the European Federalists.
Well, thank you. Could I have a follow-up, unless there is something from the public, but a follow-up question to what you mentioned about competition? I think the Commission has moved in a cautious way on that regard. The problem being, there is always a risk of fragmentation, the risk that we see member states, as they've often done in the past, vying with each other, what we call the national champions. They all want to have the leadership. And isn't that part of the problem? That it's happened with Galileo, for example, which is a project, the European Space Project, satellite project, which lost 10 years, from what I read, because I wasn't there at the time. 10 years were lost because the member states just wanted to be leaders each. Couldn't that be part of the issue? A counterexample is the famous discussion, I'm French, okay? The Siemens, in the train area, Alstom.
Siemens Alstom,
yeah. Which is a counterexample where apparently, I'm not an expert in the area, the member states, or two member states, came forward and they complained. They said, we want to be competitors with the Chinese, hugely subsidized companies in the regions, etc. I mean, what kind of a response do you have on that particular issue?
Oh, now we are really in the depths of issues. Honestly, on the Siemens Alstom, I did not understand what the Commission did, because it is a question of the relevant market, which I mentioned already. If you say, then this company has 100% in signaling railway systems in Europe, you are right, and then Commission should not allow it. But if you say that is still a small company in comparison to Chinese competitors who at this time have been very active in Central Eastern Europe as well, using European money from the cohesion fund, for example, and competing in all the tenders we made, there was a question whether we can create a unity which works. I know that GD Comp at a later stage made an analysis and came to the result it was not as bad not to allow it because the markets have developed differently, but you never know how markets would have developed if you would have allowed. So it's always a little bit of a glass half full or half empty in the estimation of what has happened afterwards. But I think at some stages we should be able to create a more European approach. I mentioned telecommunication.
How?
Yeah, but only to mention telecommunication, easy to understand. We have now in Europe more than 100 telecom operators, and we organize a competition in each member state with minimum 3, for larger 4. But these 3 or 4 are not allowed to be a number 1 in the member state as well. And of course, we have national competent authorities who take care that this competition is functioning under the oversight of the European Commission. But that creates an environment where we are never able to deliver these scale-up effects in telecommunication. And it's not only automatic driving, what I mentioned, that is more easy example. But if we would have a regulation that in whole Europe we need minimum 5, like in the United States, there you have even less than 5. Global, also US-wide telecom enterprises. I think that could create a more competitive area, even for us as consumers. It means cheaper prices with even better quality. We wouldn't have these roaming discussions, all the young children coming to me as visitors from schools, they're very happy that we made roaming. It's always my first question, did you get the message, the text message, and it was a parliament. But honestly, that is old-fashioned because of this national approach. I think we should think on some areas. Energy, I think, is another one. If we want to have a good energy supply, which is key, as one of the factors of competitiveness. We have to be more European in the energy sector. I know Germany is not the front runner for the best solution in energy policies. I say it by myself. And when the decisions have been taken, I said Germany can only afford that because we have 9 neighbors. Yeah, and that is unfortunately what we are doing. We do it against our neighbors, and that is not very comfortable for the neighbors.
Can you explain that?
It is very easy to understand. If we have a lot of wind and a lot of sun, we put all the electricity to our neighbors in the nets. If we have no wind and no sun, we ask all our neighbors to deliver electricity, and you have to manage your nets. France is one of the front runners. Belgium, even Poland has to deliver or is overflown with electricity. Sorry, that is not a serious approach, and that's why I complain about this German strategy, which is not a European one, was never discussed with the neighbors and is on the shoulders of our neighbors. Thanks God we have 9 of them. we can manage, or it's possible. I said if we would have been Portugal, our strategy would fail because we would have a lot of blackouts. To be very honest, yeah. Only to mention that, but that's why a German is always a little bit shy speaking about electricity market, because everyone knows we need it, but we need it as Europeans as well, as we will always have higher energy prices. You mentioned in the beginning dependency from Russia or outsourcing energy, low energy prices to Russia. As a failure which came back after this was not functioning anymore. So therefore, I think we should think about a few markets where we can go to the next level of integration. Or my favorite is trains. Why do we have such problems with cross-border trains? So number 1 was language. I think it was the third package, railway package, where we made the driving license for how is it, train drivers? I don't know the English word. In Germany, we say Lokomotivführer. It's a wonderful word. Because every member state said these train drivers need to have language skills. So on the trucks, we don't ask that, but on the trains, it is demanded. So we made a driving license. Wow. And now we have, with the 4th railway package, even the question that a train is not licensed individually, but that we have the same as in the planes, within the aviation sector, that a new product from Airbus, for example, that not each plane itself has to be licensed, but the family is licensed. So the E380 is licensed, so each 3880 is licensed. Last one was A350, to mention the last ones. So once it is approved, you can produce them. In the railway sector, we have individual licensing, train by train, member state by member state. It's crazy. I remember the first ICE, which was brought from France to UK via the tunnel, was not allowed to drive by itself. It was a Eurostar pushing the ICE through the tunnel because did not have the license to go through the tunnel. Sorry, that is crazy, because not only us as MEPs who want to go to Strasbourg from Germany, for me, Augsburg, Strasbourg, best would be the train. It's a nightmare because I have to change minimum once the train, and don't complain about Germany, but that's another story. Why are we not able to have more trains from Paris to Bratislava, which is one of these interconnections? Mm-hmm. Really, because of these things. And that is something we have to overcome. And there I see a lot of areas, but the main problem, I come back, it is not the Commission who made the proposal. It's not the Parliament who supported the proposals. It was at the trilogue, the third institution, who was not so in favor. And then the things have been watered down again. Sorry, I'm really fighting for that, because after 31 years in the European Parliament, mission not yet accomplished. I want to see progress now, because I work for these things so long already.
Yes, networks and trains.
Only to mention a few of them.
A few
speak for hours.
Yes,
yeah.
Trains it's a beautiful story. I mean, I studied that not long ago, because this is such a perfect example of loss of efficiency and scale and speed and etc. Now, if there is no question, thank you for your beautiful examples. I another difficult question, but maybe, let me see. Simplification. The omnibus packages that the Commission is introducing these days. This is high on the agenda. Mr. Draghi, for example, says we need 19 months for a legislative act to be adopted at EU level. And then we also have to wait for the member states to implement. And sometimes they implement badly, well, on top of that. So it is very, very slow. So we want simplification. But what is the true target of that package? And I've read about debates on that issue, and some people say, well, this is in fact more or less some form of deregulation, and we are stepping back on our commitment to environmental and social. Tim Tim had yeah, that's yes.
Yeah, number one, our process is very complicated, yes, but it creates a kind of stability which I really appreciate, because Ms. von der Leyen does not have the right to make every day 10, 100, 200 decrees like Mr. Trump. And I'm really surprised that the Capitol Hill is not responding to that, because it's all legislative power which is used by the president itself, and no one is complaining about that. So in Europe that does not work. Or even if you look to a lot of legislation in the United States, the Senate mandates authority, and then the authority sets the rules. But the authorities are politicized. All the chiefs of authorities are now changed with the new government, with Republicans and friends of Mr. Trump. So even in financial services, we are concerned that SEC and CFTC become politicized and misused against us in the financial sector, for example. As that is the area I know best. And that goes for consumer protection, FDA, the Food and Drug Authority, which is really was a good authority because it was invented because a lot of problems have occurred in the United States in the 19th century. And then this was established by the Hill, by the parliament. But now it's politicized by Mr. Trump. And then I appreciate our system, which is a lot of checks and balances, which takes time, of course, but it creates stability and trust as well, because it's really functioning. Mm-hmm. So therefore, I'm not so pessimistic. The other thing I think is more crucial. What is simplification and what is deregulation? Yeah, and that is, of course, a small path we have to walk through at the moment. And I think as we have the first omnibus in front of us, streamlining the data requirements between CSRD and CSDDD makes sense. That if you ask the same data, that is the same data for both regulations and not a similar data, because that creates additional bureaucratic burden. But on the details, of course, one can say, well, a lot of things which have been achieved are now put into question with this simplification procedure. And that is for the moment what we are discussing in the Parliament and the first omnibus, which covers CSRD, CSDDD, and a little bit of taxonomy and CBAM. And I hear that the Council has similar discussions, yeah, because it's not so that everyone said, yes, we are in favor of that, and now a few years later we say, oh, sorry, we made a huge mistake. What the hell did we do? Now we have to change everything. No, it's a little bit more complicated. But to go this path, to make it easier for the companies, but not with lower requirements on the results, which is decarbonization, social standards, establishing social standards outside the European Union as well. If I speak about corporate sustainability due diligence directive, to say it once outspoken, the CSDDD, I think makes sense. I hear less resistance on CBAM, for example. That's very interesting for me. So everyone understands maybe we have really done too much in that area. That it makes me a little bit optimistic. And on the streamlining of data, no one complains either. So I think we should concentrate on those things, and then I think we are on the right track. And therefore, I think the Commission proposal is quite prudent in between this negative and positive scenarios on this narrow path to achieve the best. So I'm quite optimistic that at the end we will be very close to the Commission proposal, as having read the impact assessment, it shows very clearly that that is the right answer, not to get rid of the aims, but to make it a little bit easier for the companies.
Thank you. I think we have a question coming from Daphne, and I will try to let her in.
Many thanks, Catherine, and many thanks to our Vice President for this excellent presentation. We really appreciate, and honestly, I appreciate a lot what you just said, Vice President, concerning the omnibus proposal. The reason is having myself a lot of experience as part of the team who prepared the due diligence legislation after I don't know how many impact assessment, and having in mind also the experience in your own country with a very strong legislative framework on due diligence and the French legislation. So I'm wondering if there is legal security if we spend 3 years adopting a legislation and a few weeks or a few months later we change our legal framework, saying that it's extremely bureaucratic and it's not in line with our main objective to increase competitiveness. Having in mind also that we sell during 2 or 3 years at the international level our standards, the way that we are pioneer developing best practice at international level for the way that we need business activities for the 21st century. Saying that, I think there is a need personally to revise few elements, but not really considering the whole approach. And I'm very happy to listen your views on this. And my last question concerning the instrument. Do you think that the legal instruments, for instance, a directive, is the right element to proceed, to continue adopting legislation as we did in the past at the European level? There is a new reflection on this, starting with in the area of migration to go back to regulation in order to avoid all this differentiation between member states' transposition measures and all the time needed in order to transpose correctly the EU law.
Yeah, thank you very much, Daphne, and it's a pleasure having you here as well as a bureau member of UEF. Honestly, that is the old question even from the late 80s, after the first change of the treaty and the developing of the single market, whether a regulation or a directive is the right approach. And we had waves, it's like waves, yeah? So we had times where directive and subsidiarity and national possibilities was in the center, and then harmonization, full harmonization via regulation was more in the interest. And we see these different waves, but I think it makes sense to distinguish between various areas. If we want to create a level playing field, the regulation makes more sense. If it is really a question of subsidiarity, sorry, I negotiated more than once consumer protection in the financial sector, where we have really different national legislations. Their minimum standards make sense, and then member states can put according to their national historical experience, things on top of it. So I think we should be more issue by issue, whether it makes sense to have a full harmonization, which is regulation, or to have a minimum or a frame harmonization, which is a directive. And therefore, you will never hear from me, we have to do everything as a regulation or everything as a directive. I think it belongs, coming from Bavaria, and you know, Bavarians love subsidiarity. Yeah, we drink it with the milk as babies. I once said the first word Bavarian babies can say is subsidiarity, not mom or dad. So I know what I speak about, but even we know that sometimes it makes sense that we have really a European approach. Take the famous example of data protection, the GDPR. It was in the past a directive which at the end created an environment with fragmentation, which was not a helpful tool because no one knew what is valid now. With the regulation, whether you like it or not, it's for one omnibus foreseen as well, but it created a level playing field cross-border in the European Union. And you knew what is the reality, what I have to deal with, for example, as a company, even as an SME. I do not need advisor country by country. And only to mention that as a good example that a regulation makes sense. And you mentioned a few of them as well, but I think it belongs on the issue. But we should get rid of these waves, yeah, more centralized, less centralized. I think it really depends. And I think Commission makes a very prudent analysis whether what is the right tool, because we know that, especially coming back to my favorite problem maker, the Council always puts into question whether regulation is needed in that area when it was proposed by the Commission. And normally it's the Parliament who pushes with the Commission that we get a better harmonization, which means a regulation. I can imagine, I remember even when we started to implement capital requirements, we have a CRD and a CRR, a regulation and a directive, and what has to be done where. Oh, I really thought we are destroying Europe when we put everything in the regulation. In our days, no one complains anymore because we have a level playing field, and that delivers good results for all of us. Yeah. People with saving accounts, so normal people like me, for the entrepreneurs who have access to finance, it creates a stable environment cross-border, and then I think we're on the right track.
So if I get it, you're not the typical German federalist, okay?
Yeah. The German federal word, the word federal in German means something different than the English word, I know, but I'm a member of the European Federalists, so in the English sense of the word. Yeah, the federal government in the United States is the central government. The federal government in Germany is the central government, but federal in German means organized according to the subsidiarity model. I know this problem. I remember when Roman Herzog, the former president of the Federal Republic of Germany, was speaking in the European Parliament. It was in the late 90s. He said, there's only one chance to build Europe, but I know this word is not well received here because it has different meanings in different languages, but it starts with an F. That was the Roman Herzog approach, not to mention it, but to mention it.
Yes, indeed. That's a nice one. We should have a long seminar about the different meanings of federal in the different contexts. Now, perhaps I should come to the last question. If you are still have this energy and good humor that you showed about defense. Now, the question is. Could the future European defense, Rearm Europe proposes 800 billion euros over 5 years for rearming Europe. Could that defense lead to a turnaround in economic governance? That is, making, and this is very ambitious, making internal demand with greater integration and the coordination of military capacities, key drivers That is, I'm putting on that issue, which is somewhat urgent, the whole understanding of the drivers for European growth, integration, cooperation, money, of course.
Yeah, it's very funny now to be alone, and it's really exhausting what you are doing with me.
Yes, you are being hard pressed. I reckon this is unfair.
Not even a water here.
Yes, I know.
But okay, sorry for starting like that, because it's a very serious issue, and I think it's not only a question of money and financial resources. Firstly, we should discuss what is really needed, because I think it's easier to open the wallet if you know what for. And sorry, that's why I was a little bit disappointed about this proposal by Commission President to put 800 billion in the window and to say we have something, and then let's start what we need. I think we should go the other way around. What do we need, and then what is the price? And then it's easier to have access to the resources by the member states. I think so. On the other hand, we have this bad experience from Germany, to be very honest. You know, after the attack of the war, Russia against Ukraine, we had this declaration of the German Chancellor, Zeitenwende, which I think is used in all languages now. And there was a special financial vehicle, as we call it, according to our constitution, of 100 billion euros, and more than 80% of that will be spent in the United States. Because we don't have the products needed. So I think we should rethink in Europe as well, how can we bring our companies together? In the military sector, it's more allowed. Sorry, there was a question from there. Than in the civil sector, in the research program. So that we really get this European approach and this European cooperation. And I think that is something where European Commission can deliver. And I'm very grateful that you mentioned Galileo.
Why?
Because that is an example for the bad and the good. It was bad as long as it was an ESA project. I'm not blaming ESA, the European Space Agency, but every member state said, if I spend 1 cent, I will get 1 cent back. So it did not work in the Galileo area. But then, and I said I was in the budget committee, and I'm still in the transport committee. I took initiative with some member states, Germany in the lead, France in the lead, and we said we do it in the unity method, so we finance it via the EU budget. And Tajani was at this time Commissioner for Industry. He was the responsible commissioner, and we said very clearly, but the technical competence continues to stay with ESA. They know it better how a satellite is functioning. But you organize, as European Commission, that we have a fair share to each member state, not with the ESA method, cent by cent or euro by euro, but everyone has something. And you know, 2 groups have been built, France in the lead for the ground, Germany in the lead for the satellites itself, the hardware, the systems, France for the software, with all the others together. And I think that is the added value European Commission can deliver even in the defense sector. So we have the EDA, European Defense Agency, was a baby from Parliament as well, with the support of the Commission. Took a long time till the Council accepted it, because they said there's no need. I'm grateful that we have this instrument now in place, because that can create a single market for defense. And the other issue is that is what we have to discuss now, and that was the Parliament as well, who had a small amount in the European research program foreseen for defense research. At this time, everyone complained. Now everyone is happy. Yeah, even Commission was not a front runner, to be very honest. Now everyone is happy that we have this small tool, as it creates an added value of bringing companies together to cooperate on European level. And I think that are the small plants which we should feed and give a possibility to deliver. That at the end we are not only looking what's available in South Korea, what is available in United States, Maybe we need a little bit as a tool for negotiations, maybe, but that we even strengthen our industries, even to get the spillovers in a lot of areas. And because at the beginning, investments in defense is, according to the economy, consumptive expenditures, not investive expenditures, because it does not create additional value as long as it does not create spillover effects. And I think if we concentrate on that, we could achieve a lot, even in the area we started to discuss with. So I'm very happy that we have these small plants, EDA, European Defence Agency, this small program in the research area, as starting tools, and that should be further developed. And the main added value of the European Commission could be if you pool, because 650 billion out of these 800 billions are national budgets, so national defense budgets. Why should member states pool it? Only if they get a return on investment as well, but not in the ESA method, cent by cent, but in a common method that the one has more in aviation and the other has more on the ground and the third one has more in the ammunition, and at the end everyone gets its fair share back as well. I think that is something which can be organized, and that is really what Commission can deliver. I think we should organize the things like that. Number one, what we need is air defense, and everyone understands that it's a European issue and that protects even Portugal. Yeah, that's one of these questions as well. What is my problem? Oh, I'm so far away from Russia. Yeah, or in Germany, the main discussion is, oh, Putin will never attack us, as he stayed for a long time in the late 80s and early 90s in GDR, and then in the eastern part of Germany. But you have to know, as a KGB agent, that is the other part of the story, but oh, it will never attack us. Yeah, so we do not need to protect ourselves. No, we have to protect us together, Europeans. And to be very clear, we should do it as European Union, open to other states like United Kingdom, like Norway. But then we have Ireland and Austria in as well, who are not NATO members, but are protected as well. Sorry that I say that clear as well. It's not a NATO issue, it's a European issue, but we should invite other partners as well. And there, Norway and United Kingdom make sense for both to bring them closer to us. So Norway from the EEA to an additional tool, and United Kingdom, I think we all have in mind that at one stage they should come home again to Europe.
Now, the time is almost gone. I don't know whether Domenico has a question. I had just perhaps a tiny one in 1 minute about the savings and investment union, this grand idea that that has come up in the Draghi report, and which I think is now being pushed forward by the Commission. What can we expect from that? I mean, in terms of growth, in terms of autonomy, strategic autonomy as well. And I know it's one of these issues you worked on as well. I'm sorry, you're the perfect victim.
Yeah, I'm squeezed now. I feel like a citron being squeezed to zero. No drop in anymore. But SIU, yes, Letta as well mentioned it in its report. And I was really surprised to read it in the mission letter from Ms. Albuquerque. So it was taken on board by Commission President von der Leyen, because till now we worked 10 years, and it was Jean-Claude Juncker who invented it on the capital markets union with low results, say it like that.
InvestEU.
Yeah, but InvestEU is not really a capital markets union. So, sorry, for the moment, a lot of CFOs are running my office because of US tax issues. And I always ask them, if you do a corporate bond, where you place it? Oh, they say in London or in New York. And I say, why not in Paris? Why not in Frankfurt? Why not in Milano? Oh, it's not liquid enough. If you make an IPO, where will you go? Oh, most probably in New York. Why not in Paris? Why not in Dublin? Why not in Amsterdam, to mention other places as well? Oh, they are not liquid enough. And though we still have this problem, the Capital Markets Union is not properly functioning. Where do you do the clearing in London? Why? Because it's liquid enough. And that is something we have to address. And honestly, we failed, for example, in the clearing with the EMIR 3, which was not the Commission, was not the Parliament, but there's a third one on the table, and I will not mention that again. Therefore, I thought we get a little bit more ambition on that as well. But on the other hand, it makes sense that we try to overcome this typical European behavior, putting a lot of savings on a saving account. Yeah, sorry, that's how I grew up as well, when my grandma gave me something for birthday or Christmas. But please put it on your saving account. And of course I did, if grandma advised me to do it like that. Now I know that if I would have bought a McDonald's chair, it would be better revenue. Or even a European company, to mention that. But how to activate that these savings, which are huge amounts,
will give a good return. Yeah. I will follow.
Yeah, give a good return, but then we need, of course, something which, for the moment, if you look to the stock markets, no one would go to the stock markets. Yeah, it's the only one way since the last week. So how to incentivize to go to the stock markets? It's a challenge. But on the other hand, only to mention one or two member states who have some good ideas, the Netherlands with their pension funds. Of course, they are sampling the savings from the people, but they have the possibility to invest as a bulk investor in infrastructure, where you have revenues as well, in equities, whatever. And if you look to Sweden, where you have this tax program that savings are invested on the stock markets as well, and that is subsidized with tax incentives, is an issue as well. I know the Swedish are more close to financial markets than the Germans, for example, are. But if there's a need of an intermediary, like a Dutch pension fund, we should give member states the possibilities to develop these things, that these savings will be attracted. And of course, number one is to have stable but higher revenues than on a saving account, that I really save for the age, that after retirement I have something I can live with. That is why US made demonstrations, or US citizens made already demonstrations last weekend, because they are mainly invested in equities, in shares, yeah, and they lost a lot of their pension savings. Yeah,
that's the problem.
That is what Mr. Trump is doing to its electorate. Oh, it's his decision, but you see people complain about that. It's not our approach. I think if you have an intermediary, as I said, a pension fund who is able to manage that, if you have the public, like the Swedish model, which gives some incentives to make it even attractive, or in the investments of infrastructure, for example, you have the public who takes the fundamental risk that private investments can go up, and that is InvestEU, where we have not attracted private investors to jump in. Maybe there are some possibilities, but if I read the working program, which is the annex of the communication on the SIU, which is already published by the European Commission, I miss a little bit the ambition. It's still the old approach. Oh, we have to think about the pan-European pension product, which is not working properly, and we have to do a little bit on securitization and stuff like that. I think that is not the big jump what we need to bring the private households to invest a little bit more with their savings, and not to put them only on a savings account.
Thank you. Well, I will perhaps keep my mention to myself personally, but
don't give advice. No, I'm not a financial
I will
advisor.
Keep my pension to
I'm
myself.
a legislator.
Well, but it's we do need, of course, some financial capacity. Now, may I try to draw a few conclusions, but very, very briefly, because there was so much that you gave us. You are such a good pedagogue, which does not mean always in agreement with you, huh? Not 100%, 90%. especially about your very strong pro-European stance. If I may, I myself am a federalist. But where are we today? Major change is being imposed on us, and we need to review our preferences and economic choices. I think you've explored a lot of that. And it is high time. Our reliance on external powers for energy, technology, and defense is unsustainable. This should be a wake-up call for Europeans and a call to act fast, because we are late and unprepared to the new global environment. For the very passionate pro-Europeans, of course, we need an acceleration, and an acceleration which involves and includes institutional progress, institutional changes, as regards own resources, as regards unanimity. We need to be more agile, to act fast, and to act with power. And we are still being shackled by ourselves, and maybe sometimes by our member states as well. We need to put a strong end to the fragmentation of our capital markets and banking system. We need efficient decision-making and political leadership. That's a difficult issue. So I will, of course, recall the resolution of the European Parliament back in November 2004, calling for treaty change. This is, of course, a red flag for some people and some member states. And so far, it has not been followed. There has been no opening to amend the treaties. Failing which, treaty change, I mean, we need at least progress, and if a consensus among the 27 cannot be found, the willing must press on ahead to overcome stagnation and paralysis. This is what we call pragmatic federalism. But anyway, we can no longer, and I think somehow you convinced us as well on that issue, we can no longer live and act below our means, below our economic capacity, and ignore the aspirations of the citizens for peace, security, and prosperity. So thank you very much, because you gave us a lot. And my conclusions are just trying to conclude precisely. Thank you very, very much. There will be a verbatim, and there will be an article published in the Graspe and maybe in different other places, but you will be certainly informed. That's minimum return you can expect from us after all that you gave. Thank you very, very much. And thank you for the people who came. Thank you, Domenico. Thank you for those who helped give access to this. You know, access still remains a problem. Free circulation is not evident. So it was a very good meeting. Thank you for me.
Yeah, we have to thank you for the moderation.